All right. Welcome back to Foiling Week 2021 and the Gurit Forum. This is going to be pre-recorded. We are talking about training in hydrofoil sports, which is a topic that Foiling Week really hasn't touched over the past couple of years because it's been lagging behind the development of the sport and the equipment. The two guests that we have with us, Mike Wiesens and Matt Nuzzo, are pioneers in hydrofoil training. And they really have put more effort into it than anyone to figure out how to safely introduce people to hydrofoil sports. And they have evolved from the windsurfing days, from the kite surfing days, kite foiling days, and all the way up through wing and surf foil and e-foil. So they've been at the ground level of this sport. I am Chris Museler, my co-host Bruno Gentoli, who's in from Europe. And again, Mike Wiesens from Sea Kindly Foil. Explain.
Sea Kindly Foil School. Yeah.
Awesome. And where in Puerto Rico?
Currently out of the West Coast, moving to San Juan. So I work kind of the West Coast, San Juan, and all over that.
Awesome. And Matt,
kind of mobile.
Perfect. And Matt Nuzzo from Real Water Sports in the Outer Banks. How long have you guys been in business, Matt?
Hey, Chris and Bruno, nice to see you guys. Thank you for having us. We've been involved in, we started Real in 2001, and our goal was to make new riders every day, and have evolved through kiteboarding. And as the foil sports have come into the fray, we've adopted them personally, and as well developed teaching techniques to help evolve our instructional programs.
Awesome. Well, let's go right to the beginning point of this whole thing, which is the way most of us learned, and Mike was talking about this before we started, is we get thrown on some experimental gear. I remember, Matt, when we started with the F1 Ram Air kites with no quick release or anything, and
launching straight downwind, kite straight downwind.
Yeah,
the hot launch.
Hot launch.
So we've all learned that way, and we're lucky, and Mike probably has some stories too. We're all lucky that we even have all of our digits. So it seems that training, particularly in these fringe sports and these kind of adventurous sports, has lagged behind the development of the equipment. Everyone wants to get the equipment to market, sell a lot. It happened in kite surfing. It happened in early foiling, and now in wing foiling and surf foiling. So what's right now, why, maybe Mike, start with you. Why are there still so little training facilities like Sea Kindly and Real?
So I'll start with what we have. So for example, we have a lot of kite schools, right? Because I believe there's a lot of locations where conditions are adequate for kite schools. Where Matt's at, there's wind, and then there's flat water, or there's water and there's room to go do this, right?
Right.
My challenge with teaching an e-foil is I need no wind and flat water. And so, I just think finding the ideal conditions is difficult to teach somebody how to foil. But also, you were talking about equipment and making equipment that's safe for learning has also been a challenge, because I think a lot of the people are just designing equipment that is going to go out to market and sell. And, so me, what do I do, to teach these people, or to learn, or, how do I get somebody started? Why is it lagging behind? It's just, we haven't found that perfect formula. For me, all I do is teach e-foiling. It's what I do most. And I think that's the best way to start.
Right.
But I originally started teaching people behind the ski.
Yeah.
Towing them on a big board with a smaller wing, so that, when they fell, they weren't so close to the wing, or and using the ski, I could control the speed, because that's one of the things, like wakeboarding, every other sport that we used to do, you needed to kind of get going fast, and so that the rider could get up. Right. With the foiling, the driver has to know kind of what they're doing. Right. And that combo of you need the right equipment in the back, you need the right conditions, and you need the right instructor. I think that's what's been hard to find. I can't find a person that I would say, hey, go learn foiling from them.
Right. Yeah, so that's like a secret recipe that you guys are working out. It's not like you guys want to be proprietary about it. You just, it's hard for everyone to figure it out. How about you, Matt? I mean, obviously in the United States, we don't see any place like yours, really. People may be trying to do little parts, but what was your evolution to getting into the foil training?
So coming back to the question is, I think that foiling is still really much at the infancy. You know, it's just started. You know, even though we've been doing it for a while, we're really the early adopters that we're getting into this sport. And there's so many disciplines that are just really, we're just cracking the surface of what's available. So the instruction will follow behind that. What we saw coming out of windsurfing, you know, I was involved in teaching windsurfing since I was a kid. That there was the kiteboarding came out, there was the early adopters that were getting the gear, piecing it together, but there was no instruction because nobody developed instructional techniques to go along with this equipment. And the equipment was evolving so quickly that, you know, they're just, it was kind of like you saw this, you went and got the gear and you taught yourself how to do it. And that's really what we've seen in foiling. And it's been happening over a little longer course because there was, you know, I mean, there, you know, at least in the most modern iteration of foiling, it started with kite foiling and then went into, you know, the other sports evolved from there and the equipment kind of caught up. You know, this is not going back to the toe Laird and Dave Kalama toe days, but like kind of more recent. You know, so, you know, when we started to see the kite foiling started happening, it was like, wow, this is very long mass, small wings, really kind of extreme learning sport. And then, you know, some people did invest into the beginners, like Slingshot made the graduated mass system, which was a game changer, right? It went from a 90 centimeter mass to a, you know, 45 centimeter mass. Like you took a lot of the, it's hard to foil on a 45 centimeter bass, but you took the danger factor out of it, right? So I think that what you're seeing now, at least what I'm seeing in the industry, is a lot of kite schools, a lot of people that were involved in some sort of wind sport are now crossing over into you know, foiling sports, into wing. E-foil has been, you know, a complete new product, as Mike was saying, that's totally available. It's completely accessible and is an amazing learning tool to learn to foil. Even if you don't go buy one, but you want to learn to foil behind a boat, it's so much safer to learn on an e-foil and then go and take those foiling skills to the boat, because you don't have that kind of harsh water start program that you do get from, you know, learning, you know, I mean, Mike did
it's aggressive.
Like,
the harsh water start, man.
It's a harsh water start, you know.
Oh God, I do not enjoy teaching people behind a jet ski. I absolutely enjoy teaching people on the e-foil. It's just super frustrating.
Well, I have a question to both of you, and then we'll dig deep into the methodologies of teaching, because I think there's a lot to be learned from. A lot of people are looking at this to say, how can I introduce this to our current programs, whether it be in boating or water sports programs. I don't think any of us can argue that there's a tremendous influx of people who are not from the wind sports industries or wind sports game. And that's tapping into a much larger segment of the population, people who aren't predisposed to wind sports or other water sports. So with the idea that there are very few places to go train, do you guys have any worry about the industry itself and the sports, these hydrofoil sports, getting negatively impacted by such a large number of people coming in with not the infrastructure to support them in terms of training? Do you worry about that? Like, what did you learn from kite surfing? Did it all work out just fine? And do you think it's going to be the same with this? Or do you think we might have some problems with people getting hurt or the sport getting banned in certain areas?
I mean, with kite surfing, you're taking up a lot more space. You need really kind of more specific, you know, even down where Mike is. I started teaching kiteboarding in Ocean Park in 2000, you know, 99, 2000. And this is a crowded, busy city beach. There's major inherent dangers and laying out, this was 40-meter lines at the time. We're launching kites straight downwind. It was crazy,
Yeah.
So there's a lot different dangers associated with that, because you're not only potentially harming yourself, but you're also harming the public at large.
Right.
With the foil, the damage you're going to do is mostly to yourself, unless you do something stupid like take a surf foil into the lineup without a leash,
Right.
and then it goes and cruises through the lineup and whacks some kid.
Right.
But those are some really basic tenements that, a lot of people are promoting to, hey, be responsible in the water with your equipment.
Right.
So I think we're in foiling's in a different spot, because when you take out harming others, hey, if you harm yourself, it's dumb on you. You harm others, and it's like, okay, now that's bad press for the sport and for the longevity of the sport.
And how about for you, Mike? So maybe we're not worried about like all the, what happened with kiting, which is it getting banned in a lot of places, and our access got restricted. And you don't have that same worry with hydrofoil sports.
So that's a really good question, because that's what's happening to me right now. The demand for me to give lessons is growing, and I don't have the resources to do it.
Right.
And I think, I think slow is fast. I think
in terms of progression
I think that if we go slow, and I'm sure Matt agrees, and if we do this right, then we'll have a really good system here. I want to say within 6 months to a year, I should have a really good system. My eFoil system is ready to go. Like I can duplicate that and teach it to anybody. I'm sure Matt does as well. I'm super interested to know what other people do. But like for the winging and the other foiling, in 6 months to a year, I should have a system down. And then all that it would take would be for some of us to get together and say, hey guys, let's just kind of do it this way, have the procedures. And I always say, don't blame the human, blame the procedures. Then go adapting the procedures as we all gather information. But I think within the next 6 months to a year, I'm going to know how to teach somebody how to foil behind the jet ski correctly and safely. And I'm going to know how to teach somebody how to wing, correctly and safely. Like it's just, and then from that, places like where Matt's at, I think those are the amazing places, because he has a lot of instructors, and those guys will then carry it on, it's kind of what I do. Hopefully when we get deeper, I get a chance to show what I do,
Yeah. Awesome. And Bruno, just on this note, and then we'll get into teaching methodology and how things work for these guys. We just mentioned before equipment, and how equipment kind of pushes out, faster, higher, lighter. And that's not necessarily conducive to learning. What do you think that, do you think that there are avenues between industry and the the people between industry and the end user, which is Mike and Matt, are two of the few people in the world. Do you think that already exists, or do we need to create that connection to make sure that the industry is pushing what these guys are doing?
Well, I think that's a great question, actually. We're actually having a talk about this specific subject on one brand who is actually focusing on that, which is a big brand here in Europe who are developing rubber leading edge and trailing edge foils to be able to do it safely.
Yeah.
Because I guess for the four of us, falling on a foil, on the tip of the foil, is not something we look forward to. It happens.
It's happened to all of us.
Yeah, like I lucky for me at least, many times it was the wetsuit getting the worst part of it. Yeah. I never hurt myself, but when we begin, especially on the surfing, having a leading edge that is rubber would be excellent. And I think this adaptation of the companies getting into a more accessible equipment, at least to beginning, will open up the door to people to not be afraid and try and realize that, yeah, it is still a dangerous sport. We're not playing cards.
Yeah,
we need to be careful, but the risk it's getting lower and lower. Like Matt was saying, with the shorter mast, it removes this scariness of the sport. And once you realize that, yeah, 45 centimeter mast will give you this access, and then you say, okay, yeah, it's really hard to foil on this, I will go to the 60 and then get to the 90 and be comfy. And then you realize when you manage the gear, you can go and have fun completely in a safe place.
Awesome. Well, let's get to the training. We'll start with Matt, and then we'll move over to Mike telling us how they do things. I know you guys are both going to have probably already learned from each other, but there's so much learning to do in terms of how this sport is presented safely and methodically. Matt, you had said that, I don't know if it was from when you set up the shop for kite surfing, that you had visited, you know, other industries like the ski industry where they have training down, you know, golf has training down, tennis has training down. Everyone does it the same way across the country. What did you learn when you started to set up your early kite surfing programs, and how have you adapted your methodology to foil sports?
Great question, Chris. So a little bit about our background at Real is that when we got into instructional sports, we kind of took our past experiences from, you know, being students and being teachers for, you know, since we were kids, right. And then taking that and looking at like industries, right? So we did work with the Aspen Ski School quite consistently in our earlier years and still do today. From everything from management techniques to training techniques. We go and do their on the snow trainings, or where they're onboarding people doing their student training, and just watch their process and methodology of how they're presenting the information, right? So people are learning physically, audibly, and visually, right? And when you get those three components, you really have to boil it down to understand the student first, right? Yep. You know, it's like to understand how the student's going to learn, and you need to, you know, train your coaches to assess that in your first 5 minutes of meet and greet.
Exactly. Right.
And you have to test. You're almost testing the student without them knowing, so that you can do a better job of communicating with them through the techniques that are going to learn. And then from that, you build a progression, but you also need to, you know, having a like Mike was talking about, having a progression of how you're teaching things, a sequence of how you're teaching things, so that this is something they do great in the snowboarding world, is that you're having attainable goals, and you get these small attainable goals, and you're reaching these goals throughout the course of your learning experience. So if your goal is to go snowboarding downhill, well, you don't just get there. You don't, you know, that's not the goal, right? The goal is putting your board on, you know, getting, you know, getting to your feet, right? Getting, you know, learning how to fall right, right? So you have all these small goals along the way, and people are achieving these goals and achieving success. So, you know, we like in coaching any of these sports as you're a part-time psychologist, right? You need to get into the mind of your student. You need to help them through, you know, through the lows of them sucking, and you know, pamper their ego, so to speak, to make sure that they can achieve those small goal sets to reach the end goal of, you know, snowboarding downhill or riding a foil in this case. Right. Because as the four of you know, that once you stand on a foil and glide for more than a second, you have, you know, hit the crack pipe for the first time, and you are hooked.
What you're saying reminds me to when I was teaching kite surfing in Ocean, but not in Ocean Park, but further in Punta Las Marias, close to where Mike used to live. And this guy wanted to learn kite surfing, and his only objective was to jump. So I want to jump, and that's the most scary student you can have.
Yeah, right, definitely.
Yeah. So Matt, for our audience, give us just a normal progression for, you know, like if someone wants to kite foil or surf foil or wing foil, is the instruction the same at the beginning stages?
Really depends on what skill set they're bringing into it, right? So we get a lot of people that are coming as, you know, they're intermediate kiteboarders or advanced kiteboarders. They're saying, hey, I'm seeing this kite foil thing. I need to learn the kite foil. So then you're taking, you know, it just depends on what you're coming into, and then you use the tools and the resources you have available. hey, it's not windy today, but you don't know how to foil at all. Let's go take the e-foil and go and train on learning how to foil. Right. And so the e-foil is, you know, for everyone across the board is a great first step learning how to foil process. Because you can teach, you know, it's quite different, because the hardest part with the e-foil is you're having to, you know, control the power. You're control the power, you know, you're doing two things at once, but you're having to control the power, which for some people that haven't played video games, like older people, they just have a problem with actuating the trigger. You know, but that's like, you know, you can quickly overcome that, but then you're controlling speed, then you're controlling roll and pitch, you know, so there's a lot of it depends on the process of which you're coming into, which sport you're doing. But really the first and foremost is understanding the equipment, understanding the objectives of physically how it's, you know, technically how it's going to work. And then, you know, hey, if you're starting on a kite, and we can go right, if you're a kiteboarder, we can go right into learning on the kite. And then it's just a matter of, you know, learning to handle the board safely. You're going back to the basics, right? Hey, I'm an advanced kiteboarder. I haven't body dragged with the board, you know, like out with the board and back with the board in a long time. I haven't worked on setting up for a water start in a long time. I just do it. It's inherent knowledge, right? So all these things, you have to kind of take the student, send them back to the basics and go forward. So our teaching techniques really vary quite a bit depending on what the person's end goal is. Because if you're getting into foiling, you don't want to just wing foil or wake foil. You want to, most of the times, like, okay, what's the primary? And then what's the second, you know, what are your other couple options you're looking at for doing this? Hey, I want to learn to wing foil, you know, but I also have a small boat that I was thinking I could foil behind. Okay, cool. So your two things are going to be wing foiling and boat foiling. Realistically, the boat is, you can run the boat every day, you know, so that's going to be probably your primary, and we're going to get, you know, we're going to focus on boat foiling. We're going to get to the wing, right? So the wing takes time, and you got to piece it together with the technique and the conditions. And then, you know, the boat is something like, hey, I can do this and get my reps on it and get the training down. So a lot of it is just understanding the end goals of the person, you know, understanding the skill set that comes at them. Because we're teaching people to, you know, wing foil, and they've never foiled or wing. We're teaching the wing on land, and then we're teaching the wing on a sup, you know, and then we're teaching the e-foil. You're separating the parts just like kiteboarding. You don't go out and go kiteboarding with, you know, riding a, you know, like a kite and a board first day. You're separating the kite, you're separating the board, and then you merge them in the middle, right? So again, coming back to this concept of small digestible goals to reach the end goals of what you're looking to achieve.
Cool. And Mike, in Puerto Rico, again, just like Matt, you guys were early days with windsurfing, kite foiling, surf foiling. What have you evolved with your program now for teaching foiling, and what are most people asking for?
Okay, so just a little bit of kind of history to kind of let you know how I got to where I am right now. So when I went to at Nick's house where they make the e-foils.
Nick Leeson.
Nick Leeson, yeah.
Yeah.
They were handing the e-foil to a friend, and then they would watch from the fence, and I'm walking, and all I'm hearing is like, ooh, ah. Right. And so, you know, I went up to Mike, I'm like, we need to do something about this. And so my background is I'm a pilot, I'm an air traffic controller. So, you know, I'm a procedural person. My training experience comes from training air traffic controllers for 16 years on the job training. And so that's kind of where I got my edge on what I do. So what people are asking for is just, they see the machine and they're like, wow, that's amazing. And I want to do this. At the beginning, I was pretty scared teaching just about everybody. I can tell you right now, and I think Matt said that like everybody can come down and e-foil. Cool. I have a system, and it's just like he said. You know, one, I vet the client, I vet the student. I'm like, okay, like, who are you? How do you learn? You know, and depending on how that person responds is how I'm going to give him the lesson. I have a basic set of steps that I take. But Matt was absolutely right in, you know, I basically give a different lesson every time because it's a different person.
Right, cool.
All right. And then just breaking it down into the steps, what I do is, you know, and they taught me this, and you know, it was a joke, air traffic control, but safety first, right?
Yeah.
So that's how I start my lesson. And you know, really the main part of my lesson is I'm just teaching people how to be safe while they're doing everything that we're doing. So 80% of what I do is I teach people risk analysis and
right.
how to go about doing what they're going to do. And I believe that's how it should be done. For example, Bruno says that there's a company, you know, making foils that are soft, you know, right? People tell me, oh, there should be a cutoff switch on the control when I fall down. I want to train people to let go of the trigger when they fall down. I want them to know that they have to do that. And in order for them to progress, they have to let go of the trigger. They have to learn how to cover their head.
Right.
You know, and that's what I do. So, so, you know, I have a system that I go through. I'll say it because, you know, the uncles at Bragg at the Big Wave Risk Assessment Summit told me that it's my job to do this. You know, I have to pass it on. What we do is, and this is how I start the lesson, you know, I tell them, look, let's identify what's dangerous about the e-foil. And we go through that. Once we identify what's dangerous about the e-foil and operating the e-foil, we come up with a mitigation technique. What are we going to do about that hazard? How are we going to avoid that? Okay. And then I tell them, okay, well, now that you know, we have to remember to do this, and we are going to do this, and we're going to supervise ourselves in making sure that we do this, right? So this is the beginning of my lesson. After that, I do the same thing that Matt does. I just break everything. Learning how to e-foil is 3 levels. They learn to ride the e-foil on their belly, and, you know, just like putting on a snowboard, you know, everybody can do that. So they get on the e-foil without pressing the trigger. So they're already starting to be aware of that trigger, which I tell them like it's a gun, and they go out on the e-foil on their belly and they're riding the e-foil. You know, level 2 is going from being on your belly to standing up. And I break that down into small steps, just like Matt said. And then, you know, step 1 is, okay, get to your knees. All right, then after your knees, you put your hand in your front foot, and breaking it down like that, eventually in about 30 to 40 minutes, most people are flying the e-foil.
Cool.
That's the basics of it.
Yeah, awesome. And I know from my experience, I was down at Real Water Sports this spring, and I'd only been down there once before. I never saw the operation in motion, and I saw every different stage being done through the different wind conditions. And it's done similarly to what you said. There's like, it's so funny knowing Matt from our early days of trial and error and seeing something being done so professionally with there was just no looseness at all in the program. Everyone was happy, but there was a methodology apparent. Yeah. You just walked in from any sport and you watched what was going on the waterfront with you or Matt. It was really obvious that you couldn't see daylight between, you know, best practices and what they were doing, which is really
one
awesome.
thing that I wanted to ask Matt is, you know, I used to teach everybody with a helmet. I know liability wise, insurance companies teach helmet, but I have this story, and I want to see what Matt thinks about this, because I respect his opinion on this. I stopped teaching without helmets now. I use a cap with a bump cap. You know, I taught 20 people with helmets. 20 people bought 20 e-foils. And then I went to visit my 20 students, you know, clients, and none of them were using a helmet. And in that moment, I realized I failed them. I was like, man, you know what? I did not do my job, because I didn't teach these people to cover their head or protect their head when they fall. Right. And I implemented that now into what I do. In order for them to progress through my training, they need to show me that they're aware that they need to protect themselves. Because I don't know what your experience is, Matt, but like the people that ride e-foils down here, nobody wears a helmet. You know?
Yeah, so. I think I've seen that as well. Like, you know, people, some of our customers have gotten e-foils are wearing helmets. Some are choosing not to. You know, you know, for our lessons, we require helmet use during our lessons. It's a, you know, for any foiling sport, we're requiring helmets. It's a pretty basic safety item that can help. I've actually recently not recently, about, you know, 6 months ago, started going through different helmets, specifically winging, you know, wearing different helmets winging, because I never, knock on wood, never, had my foil come and smash me in the head. But what was happening is I was getting headaches because you're falling off of a suspended thing. And then the first thing that, basically the last thing it hits is your head backwards on the water. Right. And so the wipeouts winging are really weird because your hands are up, and when you're falling, you fall, you rotate, and you fall off the foil and hit your head, on the back of the water. And as I was starting to ride more in the ocean, riding swells and going faster and more out of control, those, next day headaches were becoming more regular. And so I went through a series of helmets that I tried, just to do this. And I ended on just a thin, Tom Carroll surf gaff. It's very thin, but it takes the sting out of the impact on your head when you're hitting the water. So, helmets are one of those things that, yes, helmet's not going to ultimately protect you. I've worn a helmet and, had the thing smash and come all the way over my face because it just caught in the back, and that wrenched my neck more than hit my head, so I've hear people, you hear the argument for and against helmets. A lot of our wake park guys and stuff, they have specific types of helmets they're wearing. They're like, sometimes they buck it out and they catch the back of that helmet and and either get you creased in the nose or give you whiplash. And that being said, I think there's, a lot stronger advantages to wearing helmets for foiling, particularly at the onset. As you continue to get better, you're just going to keep pushing yourself. You're actually more liable to get hurt as you become more advanced at obtaining a head injury because you're pushing yourself harder. Whereas when you're beginning, you're more tentative. You might have the e-foil come and impact you, right? Like you said, hands over your head, falling to the sides. Those things are critical in the learning process, right? So like you said, is hey, I came back and realized hey, I need to teach people better to cover their head. One of the things that we recognize is the most dangerous thing in e-foiling is falling forward, right? Yeah. Forward is the last place you want to be when you're falling from an e-foil. Because the thing's coming at you. It's got a lot of weight.
It's gonna come at you.
Yeah.
So we spend a lot of time in that onset when you're making the transition from your belly to your knees and teaching people to bail to the sides, right? So once you start, get a little elevation, okay, let's learn how to fall to the sides or backwards as opposed to falling forward, which is hard because a lot of times you're really forward, so it does take technique to do that. So technique, basic safety, life jacket, impact vest is great because again, your arms are up and a lot of these things, protecting your sides. It's nice to see they're starting to make some safety equipment with, better padding on your rib area.
We need more of that.
The
equipment.
Helmets that, again, we're kind of going back to some, old school helmets that are working, but they're not super high impact helmets. It's more of just to take the bite out of the water. And, if the foil kind of falls and then catches a little wave and comes into you, it's still going to hurt, The reality is I see more people get, in the summertime, I see more people get injuries from surfing their longboards, in small knee-high to waist-high surf than I do from people's foil surfing, kite foiling, or e-foiling. So, I think to come back to the question is are my friends that are surfing longboards and knee-high waves going to wear a helmet, because that's the most likely time that they're going to get injured? No, of course. They're like, I know how to surf. I don't need a helmet. It's no big deal, Whereas you develop this level of comfort and, realistically, people probably should be wearing helmets e-foiling. They probably should be wearing helmets, doing any of these type of sports because it most of the time it will help. There are those instances at 20% of the time where, the helmet can cause more harm, but I would say most of the times, say proper safety equipment is going to help. And then, I don't think you necessarily fail people if they don't do it. It's everyone has a different level of risk. And it's this is what's working for me or not.
Cool. Now we've been talking about, and very importantly, this base of introducing foil sports safely. I mean, the fact that Mike's a pilot, air traffic controller, checklist that rings really well with Matt. Matt's program is all about checklists too. I can hear the instructor just clicking through things, beginning, middle, and end with their students. It's awesome. We have like about 15 more minutes or so. Two things that I want to talk about is now the advanced level and giving people who aren't familiar with certainly board sports, foil sports, which is really a hyper-focused thing. And I'm always trying to explain to people, how critical and how awesome it is for your brain to get into a board sport, foil sport. And then I also want to talk to you guys about relationships with like World Sailing, who's administering, it's just an open discussion, but who's administering foiling sports now and Olympic level sports, but maybe doesn't have a relationship yet with the training facilities, and administering race management and just training instruction. So that'll be the second half. So first half, flow state. I want to talk about flow state, and I want you guys to explain to me and everyone else what flow state is and what you do for more advanced riders to get them into, if you're winging and you're learning how to ride waves like I'm doing right now, or just learning how to, reach their next level in foiling. How do you explain what flow state is and how to get into it and why it's important in foiling? So who wants to take the definition of flow state, why it's important, and how do you teach it?
If you don't mind, I just had a recent experience with a 10-year-old kid. I gave him the lesson. At the end of the day, he comes running up to me. He's like, Mike. At the end, I was foiling and I was flying and I was above the water and it was like automatic. And I looked at him, I was like, yeah, buddy, you got it,? And so the story goes 4 years ago, when Nick was talking about the e-foil, he was like, what I want to design what I wanted to do is I want you to think it and I want it to happen. And I think Matt was touching on this before. The control, the trigger, it takes so much concentration on the e-foil at least. And again, my experiences with the e-foil a lot to handle that you have to be there, you have to be present. And then not only that, then you're connected to this thing that's moving, there's things happening around you, and then you lift up out of the water, it gets quiet. And so that noise, that stress from the noise goes down. And I think that's what's happening. That's what people are feeling. They're just having to be, there's no choice. You have to be there. You have to be in the moment and you have to be like hyper-focused. And that's how they're getting and feeling the flow state, at least in my experience teaching with the e-foil.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the flow state, being in a flow state is just being currently present. Yeah. The world disappears around you and you are hyper focused on that. You're not even focused. You're currently present. You're not future or past. You're currently present. And that oftentimes happens, with extreme athletes. If you talk to a extreme skier or whatever, wherever it is, like I read a book when I was ski racing in high school. It's called The Inner Book of Skiing, and it talked about focusing on your breath, because they're like, if you're at this point where you're racing, you know how to do turns, you know how to run gates, you know how to do this. And if you're thinking about what gates are there coming ahead of you, your brain's, your brain and your body's already way past what you're thinking about. Your body's 5 turns down that hill, whereas your brain is 1. And so it becomes a thoughtless process where you are currently present. And so foiling, with danger comes higher recognition of like that fight or flight, like your body just,
and consequences.
Your brain turns off. And and so with foiling, you look at it and you're like, this looks hard, this looks dangerous. So you can't really necessarily teach flow state. Flow state is something that happens by nature of circumstance of what you're doing and where you are. So teaching someone, you could, I take that back. You can teach someone how to get into a flow state, but that's more of like breathing meditation, kind of a different space than hey, I'm going to go have enjoyment foiling.
Right.
But I found personally that foiling, because there's consequence, you just immediately you have to, it takes 100% of your concentration.
Right.
And it's the sessions are sometimes exhausting, not only physically because of the the pumping and the paddling and whatever the sport you're doing there, but it's mentally taxing as well, because you have to really be present so you can adapt and react in real time as to everything that's coming down the line. So there's no such thing necessarily in our program with teaching flow state, but you're basically kind of nudging people into that. And someone's flow state might be on their stomach, just learning to actuate the trigger, or might be, the first time they actually are on a kite and get pitch stability and can glide on a single tack for a long period of time. Or might be, it doesn't have to just be the advanced level. And the advanced level is like, hey, the first time I do a cutback on a wave, or learn how to pump, or, any of those type of things, I know that when I take foiling sessions of any type, like there's a lot of concentration. It's very easy to tap into that flow state, and you have this just amazing euphoric high that comes after it, where you're kind of like, okay, I want to do that again. When am I going to get in my next hit?
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, that I'm glad you added it. It's that, there is the danger, there is all this concentration, but there is an amazing positive reward, euphoric feeling that kind of goes along with that. So both of those things you're feeding off of each other. And I feel it you said on higher levels, when I do prone downwinding, where I'm just downwinding out in the ocean.
Sweet.
I mean, I wish I could describe what that feels like, but you're basically connected to the ocean, and you just don't think anymore. You just think, you just look where you want to go. And at one point I remember just stopped thinking, and I was just going. It was amazing. I was just like, all right, well, I'm a fish now. I don't know, I'm a flying fish, I'm something, but I'm not myself anymore, because I'm not even moving, and this thing's going like 18 knots, just going down there, and that's that, like the euphoria plus the concentration, the breathing, that's super important. I tell my students to do that, breathe. So right.
Awesome.
Okay.
So we're going to start to wrap this up a little bit. I'm starting to get a taste for that. Anyone who even jumps on a foiling boat gets the taste of these things. And that's what's really awesome about Foiling Week, because even like we just had Sam Manoir, who is designing the top Vendée Globe foilers. And he's just talking about the concentration of the skippers, but also the fun and that euphoria that comes out of it. I was asking him, like, isn't this dangerous for the skippers? Do they worry, or do you worry? He's like, yeah, but he goes, we go through our process, and they're just really fun to sail. So we can't forget Chris, that element.
I got one thing to add in about what Mike was talking about. He really tapped into the downwind foiling is probably the most pure aspect of all of the foiling thing. And what you get when, what you feel from the first time you foil to, I'd say downwind foiling is probably the most extreme end of what you're getting for that flow state. But the thing that is so accessible and attractive to foiling is when you get the weightlessness of riding on foil and the support of the foil and the glide, that immediately puts you into the flow state, because it takes your body out of its natural habitat. There's only, it kind of takes your body out of this, what is known of any norm, and puts it into this other dimension, so to speak.
Flying foiling, with no air, nothing around you.
Exactly. Foiling, you are literally entering another dimension of what is possible, and we're literally just starting to do that. That's surf foiling. You turn and you take your first pump, even if you don't make it to the next wave out the back, you take that first pump, you literally are like, oh, the whole lineup just changed. I'm now surfing a video game where it's a 3D lineup. It just completely changed, right? Downwind foiling, like you go out and you like you pump off the beach and you go and you're out to sea and you're like, okay, I'm now probably a mile or so. I'm at least a half an hour paddle in if I eat shit, and I'm going out to sea. I'm riding the ocean, you know, or you know, part of the ocean. You know, and so from the foiling is so unique because from your first glide where you get pitch stability and go to the most extreme level that we're at currently today, you are in a complete different dimension of what has been possible for water sports. So that's the juice, you know, that's really the for me personally, that's kind of the connection to the you know, connection that really makes it different.
Now we're going to wrap this up. It seems to me that the easiest entry into hydrofoil sports is through the smaller board sports. And that's where the largest numbers are coming in. I know from talking to the manufacturers that the industry and talking to you, Matt, about, you know, retail, the industry is really booming right now. I just mentioned our last topic is going to be about the administrators of water sports in the sailing side of things in wind sports. World Sailing is the kind of the de facto leader besides professional PWA, IKA, and then we don't have a surf league yet, but for foiling. But besides that, World Sailing and clubs, boating facilities, community boating facilities and yacht clubs and those kind of things. What do you guys have any advice for an organization like World Sailing that's administering racing for hydrofoiling now very recently and going forward to the 2024 Olympics, where like almost half those events are going to be hydrofoiling, and then to community boating clubs and other waterfront boating facilities that people are coming to them saying, we want hydrofoiling. Do you have any advice to the national governing bodies and the boating clubs when people come to them and ask, you know, what about hydrofoiling? That's what I want to do. It's kind of tricky.
Yes.
That's a tricky question.
Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
What's the advice? Simple advice.
Don't hold back. Like take your foot off the clutch, you know, and let's go. I mean, you know, the before you guys go foiling, like just get after it. Start.
I was just going to say, don't think about it too much. It's not, I always tell people foil more. Like if you're winging or if you're kite foiling, just foil more. So I would tell them, you know, like Matt said, like, you know, so just it has to be, foiling is coming. You can't, it's coming. The feeling, like Matt said, it's another dimension. The feeling, I can't imagine on a big boat what that feels like. I'm gonna start when Kike comes back from the Olympics, Bruno. I'm gonna get on that boat that he foiled, and I'm gonna get good at that one because I cannot wait. And you know,
you're gonna have to ask the Gretchen.
No, I'm gonna have to. Please, Gretchen, can I foil? You know this thing with Kike because. Yeah. Well,
the thing bouncing on Matt's, you just made me remember a couple of years ago at Foiling Week, my girlfriend, she doesn't sail at all. She has no clue on how to sail a boat or a board. So I took her on an F101, which is like a trimaran foiler.
Yeah, it's like a model with outside amas. Yeah.
Yeah, it has like hammers that float, so you cannot capsize.
Okay.
And I put her on as a crew, and I said, okay, you just don't move. So let's go. And she started screaming. As soon as we started foiling, she was screaming like crazy, like in this flow mode, but it was instantly. And it was one reach of 100 meters, whatever. And I still remember, I'm looking forward to take her back on that, because even though she cannot sail now, I hope she can feel it one day. Yeah. The foiling sensation was much different than when I took her on a cat or on a laser. That is just cruising.
Nice.
So the speed element and being with the elements, actually, it's completely different than just sailing.
Oh yeah, that third dimension. So last question, Mike, what's your jam right now? What's your favorite session?
It's absolutely just the unassisted prone downwind.
That's the ultimate right now.
It's like Matt said, you like I am riding the ocean. Like I am just riding the ocean. Like there's no, it's ineffable. I don't know how to describe it. You have to go do it. And I am making a commitment to everybody out there. I will find a way to make sure that as many people as possible have that feeling, because it's so awesome. That's my mission.
Nice. And Matt, what's your personal jam right now?
Good mission, Mike. I like that one.
Thank you.
So surf foiling is just so accessible for me here, and having a family and full-time job and 3 dogs that need to be run and stuff like that. Like I could go for I foil surf like this time of year like twice a day, and so I can go for a half an hour session, be completely smoked, like catch you're on foil for at least half the time there, basically. The only reason you're stopped is to suck wind and, recatch your breath and then go again. So that's really very easily accessible to me. So that's, what I've been most excited about. Just starting to scratch the surface in the downwind, been doing a lot of downwinders with the wing, but just starting to get to the unassisted aspect of it, where it's just so, the wing gets you there and is kind of your training wheels.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
So we're doing these runs like with the longer runs, like 10-mile runs with the wing, just so you can kind of patch through it. But it's like, okay. And then we're doing shorter runs unassisted, more inshore, but the goal is starting to move those to offshore, and doing like the 10-mile runs unassisted, so
awesome.
Part of it is just, the conditions and the access and pickups and, doing that. You have there's a little bit of coordination to, dropping cars, making sure you got pickups, leaving the tool, and then, at the end car, so you could take your front wings off of them, and just some really basic stuff. But surf foiling, no question, is the ticket. But hey, if it's really light, I love kite foiling, because you can just go tour around and, do 20-mile tour, around the Outer Banks. And you could jam up wind and downwind. If it's really windy, like wing and gliding swells is super cool. And I just kind of had my first good in the lineup wing session this week. Where it's like I've been kind of like going really small days and going out, and then so finally getting it more in the surf zone. And again, it's small and mushy, but still getting more confident with that. So awesome. It's really, we're just kind of at the advent of what's happening. For me, I think, surf foiling is kind of the pinnacle of all water sports I've done for me personally, just because it's so much fun, so accessible, and it just turns absolute crap conditions. Like, I don't even think about the conditions. I just go just wake up and go, it's like, it's always there. It's always available.
Awesome. Well, hey guys, I learned a lot here. My hope for the future is that any big organizations like World Sailing and waterfront, community boating, yacht clubs, sailing centers, all look to people like you guys if they're starting out with hydrofoiling programs to share get your best practices, share what they learn, and that Foiling Week helps put those, connects those dots. So we're really grateful for you guys to be basically our first hydrofoil training session that we've ever had. And Real Water Sports, Sea Kindly Foil School. Mike, thank you so much. Matt, thank you. Bruno, from instructing way back in the day, thanks for adding this value. And thank you, Foiling Week 2021. We're going to continue on. And thank you guys so much. It's so much fun to talk about board sports. So.
Thank you guys. Nice seeing you.
Thank you guys for being here. It was great.
Cheers.